This is Newsnight in color, the story of July 31st, 1968, with Warren Alney.
Good evening. President Johnson has asked the steel industry to hold the price line and force a rollback of the Bethlehem steel price increase announced earlier today. The president said the Bethlehem increase is unreasonable and should not be permitted to stand. President Johnson also told newsmen just an hour or so ago that he's received information that communists are preparing for a massive new offensive in South Vietnam. A district grand jury will investigate the July 14th shooting of 44-year-old Theodore Lawson by police. A coroner's jury last week ruled the shooting death justifiable homicide. D.C. Police Chief John Layton requested Wednesday that U.S. Attorney David Bress send the case to the grand jury. Today, Bress did and told David French, our reporter, why.
Well, it was assigned to them today, and based upon their schedule of cases previously set, it should begin considering this case probably within 2 weeks.
Would it be your role to seek an indictment before the grand jury?
It's my function to present all the evidence that is available in connection with the incident, plus such other investigative data as may become available, and then properly instruct the jury concerning the law applicable to the case, and then the grand jury will determine whether a charge of violation of the law is warranted.
So you will not be seeking an indictment until the grand jury has thoroughly digested the evidence?
Well, we seek the indictment at the outset by the production of evidence and instruct the jury on the law. It's up to the jury to decide whether or not the charge should be made.
Lawson was shot by police during the investigation of a reported looting at the Safeway store near 14th and U Streets Northwest. The 3 officers at the scene of the shooting were Privates Coy Walton, Ralph Fiorenza, and Alfred Casanelli. Some witnesses at the coroner's inquest said Casanelli shot Lawson at close range as Lawson drove away from the curb on 14th Street. But an FBI ballistics expert testified that Casanelli's gun was not fired on July 14th. District Police Chief John Layton, who asked that the Lawson case go to the grand jury, today ordered trial board action against 2 other officers. They are Privates William Caton and Albert Folkman, who shot and wounded Marvin Vincent as he allegedly tried to escape arrest by fleeing on a motorcycle June 6th. Layton said this afternoon the 2 will be charged with unauthorized use of service revolvers before the trial board. At Miami Beach, more testimony today before the Republican Platform Committee. One of those testifying was Gilbert Hahn, chairman of the Republican Party in the District of Columbia. Hahn outlined a 3-point program for district home rule, congressional representation, and a larger federal payment. But he said later he's discouraged over the chances of success. Hahn said many top Republicans are now opposed to home rule measures because of events such as the rise and fall of Resurrection City. Also at the platform hearings, the committee heard conflicting testimony from Ronald Reagan and John Lindsay. Don Allen reports.
New life came to the Republican Platform Committee hearings today at Miami Beach. It came with the presence and the ideas of the governor from California and the mayor of New York City. The advice was sharply conflicting on the position the GOP should take in November on Vietnam, on city riots, and on crime. On Vietnam, for instance, Lindsay urged the GOP to assume leadership of the cause of ending what he called an unwanted war, while Reagan demanded the party advocate a fight-to-win policy.
When we increase the effectiveness of our allied forces in Vietnam, only when political and economic pressures are brought to bear in the world arena can we have productive peace talks. Our goal must never be less than an honorable peace, one which refuses to hand over South Vietnam and Southeast Asia to the communists.
The war in Vietnam has estranged the majority of the American people from their own government. It has reduced our international prestige to the lowest point in modern history. It has endangered our precarious economy, paralyzed our national will, and crippled our ability to deal with our most critical domestic problems.
Reagan's ideas on Vietnam, city riots, and crime were warmly received, and Reagan came away with an edge, as he was applauded enthusiastically many times during his speech. For Lindsay, the audience was polite but reserved, and there was no applause until he had finished. The platform committee hearings are scheduled to end tomorrow.
Some members of the Maryland and D.C. delegations to the Miami Convention are armed with petitions urging the nomination of Nelson Rockefeller. Today, Barrington Parker, a delegate from the district, was handed petitions containing 30 names from Washington backing Rockefeller's candidacy. Parker left this afternoon for Miami after a bon voyage from Rocky girls dressed in happy yellow and Nelson blue. Well, 3 of the 5 major presidential candidates were at the Sheraton Park Hotel today as speakers before the National Association of Counties. Lee McCarthy reports that story.
Officials of the nation's counties heard from George Wallace, Vice President Humphrey, and Richard Nixon. Wallace blasted federal intervention in local problems and returned to his oft-used campaign issue, crime in the District of Columbia.
Right here in Washington, D.C., they've told you at the hotels where you stay, you better be careful about after dark. You better not walk 100 feet away from this hotel. Something will happen to you. Isn't that a sad day in your nation's capital when your wives are afraid to go out at night? Isn't that a sad day? And it's because those in government have allowed it to happen. They have allowed it to happen. That's the reason it's happened. And when I become the president and you come back here to a National Association meeting, you're going to be able to walk any place in Washington, D.C. if I have to have 30,000 troops on permanent duty with 3-foot bayonets stationed 5 feet apart all over the city of Washington. You're going to have it. And I can say, and I'm not talking about race either. I'm talking about anarchists, and I'm talking about criminality.
Vice President Humphrey today called for free elections in South Vietnam by issuing a statement to that effect. In his speech, however, he stuck close to domestic problems, particularly civil disorders and justice.
And when I speak of that, I want you to remember that they're one and inseparable. And I also want it quite clear, without order, there can be no progress or justice. And without rules, no society can endure. So my agenda or program for civil order and for civil justice, which we pursue simultaneously and relentlessly, is as follows. The rioting, the violence, which has characterized too many areas of our country, must not only be abhorred, must not only be condemned, but those of us who are entrusted with public responsibility must see that it is stopped.
Nixon's remarks were brief. He then answered questions posed by a panel of NACO members. One panelist pressed the former vice president for his views on the welfare system.
I have given a great deal of thought to some very well-intentioned and in some ways, it seems to me, potentially appealing programs to provide a guaranteed annual income or a negative income tax to substitute that for welfare across the country. I cannot support either of those proposals. Now, because what that would do would be simply to perpetuate the problem rather than to deal with it. What we have to recognize, if you take a study of people on welfare, you'll find that 75 to 80% of them lack the education, lack the motivation, lack the job training. And so if you just simply provide for them a guaranteed annual income, all it will mean is to perpetuate the problem rather than to provide that motivation that is needed to move them off of it.
Did you say that banking at Suburban Trust is a matter of convenience for you? What do you mean? You have a savings account, and you even bank by mail at Suburban Trust. You bought your new car, redecorated your home, even financed that fancy boat, and you did it all with low-cost Suburban Trust loans. How about a checking account? Now, that's what I call complete banking service. Say, you must live practically next door to Suburban Trust. Of course, Suburban has 38 banking offices, more than any other bank in the suburban Maryland area. So you're never too far from a Suburban Trust office. That's right. 17 of them have drive-in banking services from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. every weekday, Monday through Friday. Suburban Trust Company, serving the community for over a half-century. Now Suburban Maryland's largest bank, member FDIC.
This is a grease maker. Not much you can do about grease makers. But there is a remarkable way to break up the grease they leave behind. It's the grease breaker, concentrated all.
Watch. Greasy oil in wash water with a leading detergent and wash water with all. All breaks up grease like no other detergent can.
There'll always be grease makers. That's why you need the grease breaker, concentrated all.
Sun, surf, and a windy gallop on the beach. Ideal for showing the difference between soap and Dove. The difference is cream. Dove is 1/4 cleansing cream. No soap has that. Even with the wind in her face, Dove is still moist and creamy. Dove literally washes your skin with cream.
Prince George's County Sheriff William Kersey today said he's given up the idea of forming a volunteer deputy force. Kersey said he reached the decision after conferring with county officials. He said the officials assured him that steps will be taken to bring about a halt in our crime situation, as Kersey put it. A group of teenagers, 800 strong and still growing, is planning a mass rally in opposition to a proposed anti-loitering ordinance in Arlington County. Virginia correspondent Charles Crawford has the story.
They may not be called drugstore cowboys any longer, but like practically any community in the country, Arlington has its share of teenagers and young people who find drugstores and drive-in restaurants an attractive place to congregate, practically any time of the day or night. Several weeks ago, the Commonwealth's attorney in the county, William Hassan, presented the county board with a proposed anti-loitering ordinance that would sharply curtail the use of drugstores and drive-ins as meeting places for any group. Hassan says the police are confronted nightly with incidents of fighting and general disorder where the teenagers gather. A large group of county youth disagree, saying there are adequate laws on the books to cope with the problem. Headed by 3 student council presidents in Arlington high schools, the group has over 800 teenagers signed up to oppose the ordinance and plans a mass rally of 2,000 for a week from tomorrow at the Washington and Lee High Stadium. The executive director of the opposition explains what he feels is wrong with Hassan's ordinance.
Our major criticism to the ordinance is that it is not necessarily. It's been put through on a false front that teenagers are widely disruptive, they have gang fights, they're plaguing stores nightly, and we do not feel that this is correct. Teenagers sometimes get in trouble, but it is not as wide as it has been said. We feel that Mr. Hassan was wrong in his statement on this, and we feel that teenagers can conduct themselves in a well-run manner. We're trying to show this with this rally.
The Commonwealth's attorney flatly refuses to discuss the anti-loitering ordinance with newsmen. One county board member, Joseph Fisher, agrees there is a problem in Arlington, but is not convinced an anti-loitering ordinance is the solution.
In the first place, we have quite a few laws on the books already that do not aim at loitering as such, but at specific misdemeanors or forms of misbehavior, making undue noise, attacking people, destroying property, threatening and causing consternation, rioting, and all the rest of it. And it may well be that we have enough legislation on the books directed at specific misbehavior so that we don't need this ordinance, but we are going to consider it.
The Fairfax County supervisors today accepted the resignation of their embattled County Hospital Commission chairman, but not till after an exchange of sharp words. Before the vote to accept his resignation, Dr. Frank Murphy told the board that self-centered individuals appeared out of the woodwork to scrap an intelligent scientific method of deciding where to put 2 new satellite hospitals. Murphy charged that the county program for health care is severely jeopardized and that construction of the 2 new hospitals may be delayed until 1975. Board Vice Chairman Joseph Alexander, critic of Murphy, flatly denied that planning will be delayed. No one, Alexander told the meeting, is indispensable. And he added, "I can't accept the platitudes and big words Dr. Murphy has put forth this morning." Today in Maryland is the deadline for filing petitions to get independent candidates on the November ballot. And it appears that